So we now have the GH1 on point, and the G80 is sitting here wondering if it's actually going to do any better than the GH1. Of course, this is a very limited kind of test. We'll be testing it a bit further in the field. This is just a quick studio, otherwise known as lounge test. So both cameras set at f2.8 on the 15mm Panasonic lens. As I think I said already, 1080p for both of them, full HD. I think the GH1 only records that at 24 frames per second, and this thing at 30 frames per second, but I might need to check that. Let's see what the results are like, see how the GH1 does in this situation. So the object of this particular test is to take a look at the video output from the G80, Lumix G80 that I'm recording this on, and compare it to the video output from the relatively geriatric Lumix GH1, and take a look at what difference we actually notice in terms of the recording quality. So let's take a look. I've tried to kind of even things up as much as possible. We're using the same lens on the camera. And we'll see what happens. I'm taking a bit of a risk here with the GH1. I'm letting it do the face recognition autofocus, and this is kind of continuing the comparison with the G80 that I've started. Obviously the GH1 is a bit of a trip down memory lane really, because I had a G1 and a G3 and a GH2, and I thought, just for kind of an interesting aside, I thought I'd try out the I wonder how it's doing on the focus. I thought I'd try it out, see just how good or poor it is. I did watch a YouTube video, a review by Stephen Heiss, and he trashed the GH1 a bit, but I think maybe it's some of it's about expectations. I have to say, when I first looked at the footage from the GH1 on the little test I did yesterday, I thought, first of all, the first thing I thought was, that's not too bad. And then I looked at it back to back with the output from G80, and I thought, the GH1's awful. But I think also, you need to kind of you need to balance your expectations. It's a very old camera, and I think actually for little clips of video it's probably going to be fine. So we will try it in the field outside, not the field, but try it outside, and see how we get on. And I think it may be okay for short video clips. So we're going to give it a fair try. There's not a lot of video settings on the camera, I have to say. It's pretty much you get what it is, and audio I wouldn't bother with at all on the camera. I think it's probably very, very poor from what I can deduce. So, but then I usually record externally anyway. I don't usually bother plugging into a camera. I think it's more generally just reliable that way. So we'll see how we get on. I'm not condemning it yet. So I'm filming this in the nostalgic film profile, aptly enough, given that I'm filming this on the GH1. How have I found it? Interesting, actually. And in some ways it's interesting because sometimes just the challenge of trying to get something good out of an old camera is half the fun. And with it being Micro Four Thirds still, all my lenses fit, etc., etc. I'm pretty familiar with the way these cameras work, so it's easy from that perspective. But getting good results is potentially more of a challenge, and this really is just summing up of where I've got to with the camera so far. So I've had it a few weeks now, and I've taken a few little video clips, and try to remember to mute the phone next time. So where did I get to? Yes, I've taken a few video clips and I've taken some stills, and I think from the stills perspective, camera's not bad. It's only 12 megapixels, so I wasn't expecting great things, but to be honest, most of the time it's good enough. That's enough, and the image quality is not bad at all. It doesn't really do for pixel peeping, but for video, it's kind of okay for short clips, little bits and pieces. I think it will struggle in poor light, and you've got virtually no control over what the camera's doing when it's in video mode. It can do, you've got no control really. You just hit the button and it does what it does. So I think that does not mean that it's not capable of producing some decent output, because I think it is. I think you can use it quite successfully to produce some nice little clips. I don't think it'd do for a serious movie maker. And the whole sound thing on the camera is a bit of a nightmare. It just doesn't record sound very well at all. Plenty of cameras don't do good sound, so I wouldn't hold that against it. I think my little trip to Frensham was partly a success. I think I got some reasonable little video clips and got some good stills, and forgot to take a polarising filter with me, which, going to a pond, I should have taken a polarising filter. One thing I would say that's quite good about this camera is I've noticed that the battery life is actually pretty good. It's not got a huge battery, but it seems to last quite well. And I found that with quite a lot of these older Lumix cameras, is that relative to what the cameras are doing, I guess, and this was the same for the GF1 and the GX1, and probably the G1 and the G3 as well. The batteries, they last quite well between charges. They do a good job. Enjoying the camera, to be honest. Enjoying it because it's small. Even though it's a very similar size to the G80, it feels a lot smaller, and I think that's because the actual grip part, the piece you put your fingers around, is smaller on the GH1, even though the camera is not physically overall that much smaller. It feels smaller in the hand. And the downside of that is that the buttons are smaller on the GH1, and they're really small, these tiny buttons on the back, and they're so small, in fact, that when I first got the camera, I thought, I'll go through the routine for picking out the shutter count. And you have to hold two buttons down at once and press another button, all this sort of stuff. And I gave up in the end. The buttons are just too close together, and I couldn't, even though I've got small hands, I could not manage to get the buttons in the right order, in the right sequence at the right times to find the shutter count. I think it's about 10,000 based on file count, but if it's at a factory reset, that could be wrong. So, not the end of the world either way. It doesn't really matter too much to me. I'm quite happy with the camera. Very pleased I bought it, and I think anyone could still pick one of these up in 2023, as we are now, and you'd have a really enjoyable photographic and a little bit of a video experience. One other annoying feature that video doesn't allow you to do is when you've got it in video mode, before you actually hit the record button in video mode, you can use the focus magnifying option to nail focus. So for recording this, before I sat down, before I started actually recording, I set the focus. This is manual focus, that's why it's not hunting all over the place. Focus is rubbish, I think I've said that before. Autofocus is rubbish. So using the magnifying feature, I set the focal distance, I set the focus here, around the plane of my face, and when I was out at Frensham, I found that if I wanted to move focus, sort of rack focus to and fro from a near object to a far away object, you can't use the magnifier. You've got to do it based on that little screen on the back, which is a little bit useless, really. It's not very good at all, not very accurate anyway. I think I did my best on one occasion where I pulled focus, but really that's really difficult, and you could do with the magnifying option. But the magnifier doesn't work once the video is actually running, it seems. So that's a nuisance, and that's definitely a not such a good thing.